Entonces, Jaime.
So, Jaime, you are the man of the hour. Everyone is talking about you. After what happened on September 12th this year, maybe never in your history has your name made its way around the world like this time, right?
No.
Así es correcto.
That's right, that's correct. It was really above the expectations we had. We knew it was going to be a big impact because to present bodies in a Congress, it meant extraordinary news, especially because we know they are real, despite all the questions and criticism. So far, no one has presented a single piece of evidence that proves that these bodies are not real.
Perfecto, Jaime, permíteme. Entramos
Perfect, Jaime. Let's go step by step, because here in Italy, there is a lot of confusion, Jaime, and the media and researchers are reporting more those who are against what you did. So I want to scale it point by point so that you can answer all the Italians who will listen to you.
Yes.
Clearly, I'm going to ask you about the discovery. What happened on September 12th and what happened after that with all the...
Ask me even difficult questions if you want, whatever you want.
I'm going to ask you about all the complaints and contrary statements that various supposed experts have said against you. And so you can answer them. Because again, many have spoken against you, against the event, against the bodies, and almost none about what are the facts and the results of the investigations and analyses. Well, Jaime, from whom did the organization of this event start? Whose idea was it?
It was a joint idea of Congressman Sergio Gutierrez Luna and myself, Jaime Maussan. A year ago, when the hearings started in the United States, I approached him because at that time there was no protection for Mexican airspace, especially in the face of an unknown phenomenon. Subsequently, Mexico, after at least 2 hearings in the United States where the issue was discussed, developed a law to protect the airspace. However, the figure of the unidentified aerial phenomenon was considered. However, this phenomenon refers to drones, planes, balloons, or whatever is in the sky. So in the United States, they made a modification, calling it unidentified anomalous phenomenon. Between the words airplane and anomalous, although they have the same letter, there is a huge difference. An anomalous phenomenon is a ship that can enter from the stratosphere inside the atmosphere to the bottom of the sea. It is an anomalous phenomenon that refers very specifically to spaceships that manifest technology unknown to humans, which is why we call it anomalous. So I suggested to the congressman to make an amendment to the law to consider the anomalous phenomenon in Mexico, since countless pilots and air traffic controllers are reporting this phenomenon, and I think it is very important. He agreed, especially after July 26th, when the pilots and also Mr. David Grush talked not only about the technology of these ships, but also about the possibility of the possession of spaceships and bodies recovered by the U.S. government. And this seemed to him a good reason to present a public hearing in Mexico, a public hearing in Congress. However, the possibility of presenting these bodies had not been considered at that time. This was my idea with his permission. Because when I realized that the United States, the Pentagon, was blocking any possibility of congressmen having access to the biological remains that Grush was talking about, I said, well, we have bodies. Because a friend was, in a sense, in possession of 2 NAZCA bodies, which I didn't know. I found out a few months ago. I couldn't believe it. However, they were here in Mexico, and this seemed to me, first of all, I would never have done it, but they were here. And I also had all the new information about what was found in the metals of these bodies, etc. And then I felt it was important to take a leap forward, and with all the risk that this entailed, to present them in front of Mexico Congress and in front of the public all over the world. I knew it would attract a lot of attention, although I didn't expect it to be so much.
Sí. ¿Quién fue?
Yes, who was it you, Jaime, who selected the names of the speakers who participated in the event?
Sí, sí, yo seleccioné a
Yes, I selected a representative of the pilots, a representative of the air traffic controllers, a deputy from Japan with whom I had had several interviews, and then they were joined by some pilots from Argentina through Andrea Perez Simondini, as well as the French organization, GAIPAN. Exactly, they came as well, and they came on their own. We also invited Robert Salas and Ryan Graves, who agreed to come, and in this way a group was formed. And then also the scientist Jose Salce Benitez, who is a man who has been investigating the Nazca bodies since 2017, and as well as Ricardo Rangel, who has been studying DNA since the year 2018. And both of them already had enormous experience in investigating the bodies. And so I decided to convene them. However, this also generated an opposite reaction from people, bodies, and institutions who wanted to discredit him.
Sí, vamos a hablar de esto más adelante, Jaime.
Yes, we'll talk about that later, Jaime. So what was your idea? What result did you have in mind to achieve when you thought of this event? What was it?
Bueno, en primer lugar, lograr la enmienda.
Well, first of all, getting the amendment, which has been achieved. An amendment will be made to the law in Mexico to consider the unidentified anomalous phenomenon. If that can be done by January, Mexico will be the first country in the world to do that, which in itself is an extraordinary achievement that some people have forgotten. And then to present the bodies so that humanity accepts not only that we have been visited, but that we were visited thousands of years ago. And that this completely changes history. These are not, as I said, bodies that were recovered in an accident from a ship, but bodies that were buried by the ancient inhabitants of Nazca, of Palpa, and so the news should be considered one of the most important news of all time.
Entonces, echar una
So, shaking things up, basically.
Pues sí, y ocurrió.
Well, yes, and it happened. I think very few times has a news story really shaken things up around this phenomenon. Opinion has been divided. Some people think it's real. Some people think it's not. But in any case, the issue has been addressed, and now the whole world is talking about this possibility because indeed, we're really being visited.
Perfecto. ¿Cuántos cuerpos hasta hoy, Jaime, son?
Perfect. How many bodies to date have been found in Nazca, and who is keeping them, including the ones you presented in Mexico?
De acuerdo a lo que...
According to Leandro Benedicto Rivera, who is the man who found them, there are at least 20 small bodies. 20 bodies. I know of 3 that are in the University of Ica, which are still there, 2 that are in Mexico, which I presented, and 2 others that a private collector had in Mexico, and after the hearing he tried to sell them. I think one of them has already been sold to Russia. Don't ask me how it goes all the way to Russia and gets there. I don't know, but we already know that one person has already sold it, and for the other one they contacted me to ask for $2 million. Then they lowered it to $600,000. Of course, I wasn't willing to buy it even for $2, because no, I don't want to participate in something like that, Pier Giorgio. So I know there are 4 here in Ica and 3 others, and there are many others in other places, so we are talking about 7. There are some who went to Brazil, some who went to Russia, and this I consider to be a product of the little attention given by the Ministry of Culture of Peru to this case. No, it is very regrettable. When I saw this happening, I wanted to stop it, but what could I do? I couldn't do anything. I wasn't going to buy them. I wasn't going to commit anything that could be considered bad or illegal. So I had to let this go, and unfortunately the Peruvians themselves have not protected their heritage, which is historic without any doubt.
Of course, perhaps one of the most important heritages in history, Jaime.
That is correct. That is correct.
So the 2 bodies you presented were already in Mexico. They were not transferred by you or another friend of yours to Mexico. They were already there.
O sea, yo me entero cuando...
I mean, I found out when José de la Cruz Salce Benítez told me, Jaime, there are 2 bodies. They asked me to certify it, but he didn't participate in taking them to Mexico. He simply certified that the bodies were real, and that was it. And that's where I found out. It was a few months ago. I don't know if this year or late last year, when I realized they were here. I had no intention of doing anything. I never had the idea. It was a spontaneous thing that arose when the public hearing had already been scheduled. So I talked to the congressman and I said, I would like to present 2 bodies with these features. And he said, can I see them? And I said, yes, you can see them. And then I asked the person who had them, and he said, yes. And then the congressman went to the site, and there he could see the bodies. And also some x-rays and other elements that convinced him that it was real, and he authorized me to present them to the Congress. That's the story.
Perfecto. Y entonces, Jaime...
Perfect. And so, Jaime, from what you've said, it seems to me that the possibility that the bodies were transferred from Peru to Mexico was due to the Peruvian government's lack of attention. Maybe they thought they were handicrafts or something like that.
Hasta donde yo sé, algunos de estos cuerpos salieron.
As far as I know, some of these bodies came out dressed in typical clothes. No, as if they were mannequins, as if they were something else. Imagine that, you know? I mean, there was really no interest. There was no kind of regulation or anything to prevent this from happening. But even if the Peruvian government had blocked their export just to destroy them, or to put them in a place, in a crate where nobody could see them, that would have been just as criminal, because they had no interest. Now, some interest has arisen in various places, so the goal has been achieved. I mean, despite the fact that, I insist, they wanted to attack my reputation, my credibility. Well, I think the curiosity is open from some scientists and institutions that I hope will investigate these in the coming months.
Será muy difícil.
It's going to be very difficult to put a stop to this, Jaime.
Será muy difícil. Yo creo que...
This is going to be very difficult. I believe that humanity needs complete answers. And so far, those who oppose the idea that this is real have not presented a single piece of evidence. And in fact, I want to talk about the terrible misunderstanding committed by the Ministry of Culture in Peru.
Yes, I'm going to ask you that, but I want to continue with the analysis, Jaime. A carbon-14 analysis was done on a sample that belonged to a body, I think Victoria's, the one that was found without a head, correct?
Es correcto, sí, porque se consideró que...
That is correct, yes, because it was considered to be the body that was least likely to be damaged. It was already damaged because it was already headless. I think this man had it broken off, and that's how it was delivered by Leandro Benedicto Rivera. By the way, it's a body that's sitting. It's the only one in a sitting position, and it's at the University of Ica. And from this, they extracted pieces of skin, and also pieces of bones, pieces of muscles, and with these, they did the analysis. Not only of carbon-14, which were done here at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, but also in the Sen4Gen laboratory, Sen4Gen, in Canada to determine the DNA.
¿Quién fue Jaime que
Who was Jaime who had the idea to take this sample and bring it to UNAM? Wasn't it you?
No, bueno, sí,
No, well, it was all of us. I mean, in Peru, there is no institution that does carbon-14 testing. It doesn't exist. So I inquired, and they told me that here at the university it could be done. So the scientists extracted these parts, gave them to me in sterilized test tubes, and I took them to the National University, where they were analyzed. It took a few weeks or months, I don't remember. And in the end, they told me that the samples regarding these beings were between 800 and 1100 years old. So it puts them in a scenario that is very important. Both carbon-14 and DNA are so important because carbon-14 puts them in an absolutely pre-Hispanic era, when the people of Nazca were in a thriving culture. So this, well, that changes everything. Another very important element is that they were buried in diatom mines. Diatom is a fossilized algae, an algae that is capable of desiccating bodies. This seaweed is 17 million years old. It was phytoplankton, and certainly in a climate change, this seaweed all over the world died and large deposits were formed because it was very abundant. And someone discovered that the bodies that are placed in this powder are preserved, they dry up. In other words, all the liquids and all the fats are absorbed by the seaweed, by this substance, and they are preserved, they are conserved. So we know that they were placed there to preserve them. In other words, it was not an accident. It was something that was planned by someone, probably human beings, who decided to make a burial that would preserve the bodies. And right there they placed, and this is very important, small offerings, small bodies assembled with animal parts. And those bodies must be the same age, although carbon-14 analysis has not been done. But we assume that since they were found in the same place, they should have the same antiquity. It would be very prudent to do carbon-14 analysis on them as well, but that's what we've been able to get so far.
Claro. Mira, Jaime, algunos han cuestionado.
Of course. Look, Jaime, some people have asked, why wasn't everything from the time they took the samples and brought it to UNAM filmed?
It was recorded, everything.
Me parece buena idea recuperar esa.
I think it's a good idea to retrieve that recording. There's so much material, hundreds of hours have been filmed. But if somebody considers that it should be submitted, I don't have, when they were delivered to UNAM, I don't have that moment for somebody to tell me how I could get 1,000-year-old samples. I mean, I can't go around the corner of my house and find a body that has 1,000 years of antiquity. It would be extraordinarily complicated. I don't know.
Algunos, Jaime, te acusan que tú.
Some people, Jaime, accuse you of stealing some mummies, that you took some pieces and brought them to UNAM.
Están llegando a lo ridículo. O sea, ¿cómo puedo yo?
They're getting ridiculous. I mean, how can I have access to a mummy? I didn't have access to any mummy. Somebody tell me, where did I do it? Where did I do it? I mean, there must be some witness, someone who says something. I mean, it's absurd what they are saying, dear Pierre. I mean, they also said that I did the public hearing to promote a newscast I'm presenting in the United States, Tercer Milenio 360° International, which started on September 18th. So they said it was convenient for me to do the hearing on September 12th, huh? When I signed the contract with Telemundo many months before, they were the ones who decided the date. Just as the congressman decided the date of the hearing, none of this was in my hands. It's absurd what they are saying.
Y puedo agregar, Jaime, que en cualquier momento.
And may I add, Jaime, that at any time anyone, an institution, a researcher, a scientist who wants to, can ask ICA for a sample and do their own analysis.
Claro, lo pueden hacer. Y van a encontrar lo mismo.
Of course, they can do that and they will find the same thing that I found. So they are absurd, aren't they? That doesn't prove anything, right? It's speculation that they want to put in people's heads. Because if you realize, every time there's a big news story about the phenomenon, there are 10,000 naysayers who come up with all sorts of real and unreal possibilities to try to discredit a case. I was watching on television when Johnny Mock, this extraordinary psychiatrist from Harvard, who did research in Zimbabwe with children, and they started accusing him, attacking him, so that Harvard would kick him out because it was madness what he was doing with children in Zimbabwe who had had an encounter with the beings. Fortunately, he overcame this judgment of Harvard, but they tried to do that. In other words, anyone who sets out to investigate this phenomenon and makes a big announcement and discovery will be questioned and attacked, because the most important thing is to discredit the messenger, because that's how they end cases on many occasions. They don't attack the evidence, they attack the person who presents it.
Claro, nadie habló de las pruebas.
Of course, no one talked about the evidence and the analysis that was done.
Why didn't anyone investigate the DNA? Whoever said DNA is false, DNA is not true, DNA proves something else, nobody did, because they know that getting close to the DNA could prove its authenticity. And because of that, anything that could weaken the arguments that these are assembled organisms, fakes, they prefer to stay away from any evidence. No one has talked about the analysis presented by Dr. Jose Salce, who is an extraordinary doctor of the highest level, among the best we have in Mexico. No one has commented on what he said, or rather proved that what he said is false so far. Why? Because Dr. Jose, it's very difficult to argue with him. In other words, he's a man who knows. And if anybody wants to do it, please do it. And you'll see that he's very firm in what he says. And he has a deep knowledge about what forensic science means.
Claro, Jaime.
Fair enough, Jaime. And can you give me a list of what are, so far, the analyses that have been done on the bodies?
Bueno, en primer lugar,
Well, first of all, X-ray analyses have been done, fluoroscopies have been done, tomographies have been done with different levels of tomographs. Now we know that new analyses are going to be done in Mexico with much more sophisticated tomography equipment. And I think new elements are going to come out. Carbon-14 analyses have also been done. DNA analyses have been done. Metal analyses have been done that are seen embedded in the bodies. It has been found that the fingers have fingerprints that are not the same as ours. They are horizontal fingerprints, which in itself is also evidence that shows that God knows what they are, right? But they are not from here. And the metal research is very important because it was done by the National Engineering University of Peru. If they want to attack the university and the results, let them, but I think it is the best technical university in Peru. And they have confirmed that these metals have gold, they have copper, they have cadmium, and they have osmium. Osmium is a very rare metal. It's derived from platinum. And you have to use very sophisticated technology to be able to extract it. It was discovered 200 years ago. So that alone, osmium inserted into a metal inside a body, should be enough evidence to believe that these are extraterrestrials, because no one could have had that technology 1,000 years ago. So there are all those elements that nobody mentions. When we talk about osmium, nobody says anything, because they know that if they do, they will lose this debate where they claim that the bodies are assembled, because that's what they say, right?
Claro. Sí, y me parece, Jaime, que
Right. Yes, and it seems to me, Jaime, that the DNA analysis results are in a cloud and anybody can see them and download them.
cualquier persona que quiera tener
That's right.
acceso.
Any person who wants to have access to this evidence can download it. It's on an official US DNA site. So I don't know why they don't want to do that. Why don't they want to do that? This is the greatest evidence of all time, right? So if there's somebody who's a super expert and says we're wrong, who studies these DNA samples that talk about a reptile that lived 2,000 years ago, and so on and so forth, and disappeared. But nobody has done it, because they know they might come across something that confirms the authenticity of the bodies.
Claro. Así que
Sure, and so they might turn from opponents to supporters of the discovery.
They don't.
Have any other analyses been done besides the ones you mentioned?
No, hasta el momento son los análisis que se han realizado.
No. So far, these are the analyses that have been done. I was talking about the Ministry of Culture. The Ministry of Culture, a few days after the bodies were presented to the Congress of Mexico, according to them, the bodies had been assembled. That is, they had been packed with animal parts, and they were based on an investigation conducted by an archaeologist named Flavio Estrada. He received the bodies from a man named Paul Roncheros in Peru around 2017-2018. This archaeologist determined that they were assembled and also had modern elements. Paul Roncheros testified that to him, one of the legs or one of the feet broke off, and he had put glue on it. But he reported it to the archaeologist, told him, "This part, don't analyze it because it has glue on it." However, it was the first thing he analyzed, this man, and when Mr. Roncheros asked him why he had done that, he said, "It's done by now." And he said, "I told you not to do that." And so the bodies, as we knew, were assembled effectively. We, in April 2017, when we started the investigation, the first thing we found were these small bodies. Thierry Yamin showed us the bodies. However, immediately, Dr. Salce, Dr. Jose de la Cruz Rios, the Peruvian doctors, all determined that they were not real bodies. And so I presented them on television in Mexico in 2017.
Allow me, Jaime. Are the bodies used as offerings that were found in the graves?
Correct. When the scientists were asked, what could they be? They said that on many occasions offerings are found in the graves, and that this could have been an offering fabricated by the people of Peru and placed near the bodies. So, those bodies are not the bodies we presented to the Congress of Mexico. There is a terrible misunderstanding, and if it is not a misunderstanding, it is an act of bad faith to try to distort the real evidence. But that will soon be clarified because the University of Ica is about to present its preliminary studies that will show that the bodies shown to Congress in Mexico are real bodies, and that the ones analyzed by the Ministry of Culture are bodies of offerings that have nothing to do with them, that never had life and never walked here on earth.
Permíteme, Jaime, sería...
Allow me, Jaime. Would that be the analysis where they say that there are llama parts embedded in these bodies?
Sí, pero yo no creo que sean partes de llama.
Yes, but I don't think they are llama parts. No, the llama is much larger. These bodies are very small, and their parts are very thin. Probably rodents, probably small monkeys. They say baby bodies. I doubt very much that baby bodies were used to make these beings, but the truth has not been determined. How they were made, or what they were made of.
Entonces, se creó una...
Then there was confusion between the bodies.
Yo creo que con toda intención y por este motivo.
I believe intentionally, and that's why I'm going to file a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against Peru's Ministry of Culture. Because if it's proven that they knew they didn't match, and they ran this whirlwind to try to discredit such an extraordinary find, then it's almost a criminal act, with all intentions of preventing it from being accepted as the most extraordinary find in history. and that is absurd. Just think what this would mean for Peru, where it would bring Peru. How much economic benefit it could bring to Peru to build a museum where all the research is presented, where the bodies are recovered, where they can be displayed for people from all over the world to come and see them. I think the Ministry of Culture acted against their own interests, not only of history, of Peru's history, but also against the economic interests of their own country.
Yo opino, Jaime, que un poder mucho más alto.
I think, Jaime, that a much higher power ordered them to hide this discovery.
Es posible, ¿no? Siempre sabemos.
It is possible. We have always known that the influence of the United States in these kinds of matters has been there, that they have always intervened in other countries to prevent this truth from coming out. It's a possibility. I don't have any proof of that. However, it makes us think, because in fact, there is no explanation. However, there is another one, there is another possibility. The archaeologists and anthropologists in Peru have a great influence on the Ministry of Culture, and they, from day one, from the moment the first evidence was presented, and Gaia.com did it, immediately said that the bodies were fake, without having had a hand in it, without having seen an image. They were fake, and that I, Jaime Maussan, in Nazca workshops, had cut off the fingers and added them at the top to make them look bigger. This refers to the body of Maria, which is a body that we will hear about very soon, as soon as the investigations are completed, because that discovery is even bigger than that suggested by the bodies I presented at the Congress. There is even bigger news coming, Pierre.
Sí, es mucho más diferente.
Yes, Maria's body is very different from the one presented in Mexico.
Desde el primer momento quisieron sugerir.
From the first moment, they wanted to imply that none of this was real, without having investigated anything at all. Their opposition was brutal. Now, if these groups have such influence on the Ministry of Culture, there is also the possibility that at the local level, those who felt affected generated this historically wrong reaction from the Ministry of Culture, because sooner or later it will come out. And sooner or later the Ministry of Culture, if he doesn't recognize it before somebody else proves it, he can be very much affected indeed, no doubt.
Yo me recuerdo, Jaime.
I remember, Jaime, that at that time, in the first phase of discovery, you went to the Ministry of Culture in Peru and they almost kicked you out.
Casi.
Almost. I had sent a notice that I was going to be there, that I wanted to meet a doctor from Mendoza, if I'm not mistaken. He wasn't there. They referred me to somebody else. He wasn't there either. They were nervous that I was there. A low-level executive came down, and the only thing he said to me was, send an email, and that was it. I begged him that they get involved in this case, to attend a press conference that I was going to have the next day, and they didn't want to do that. It was 2018. They didn't want to know anything about this, so the failure comes from a long time ago, and now they are doing it again, lying and saying that this is a small assembled body. But this was stated by us before them. This is what we are actually presenting. That is to say, it is a complete defamation.
Claro. ¿Quién fue Jaime?
Sure. Who were, Jaime, the leading specialists who carried out the studies and analysis of the bodies?
Pues mira, vinieron gente de San Petersburgo, la Universidad de
Look, people came from the University of St. Petersburg. I can't remember the name right now. Dr. Salz, Dr. José de la Cruz Rios. There were also at least 2 Peruvian doctors. People also came from the United States. I don't remember the names, Pierre. It was 5 or 6 years ago, but there was a very high-level team. Dr. Salz, as I said, is without a doubt one of the most important forensic experts in Mexico. That has to be considered, because when other people say that such an expert analyzed it and say that's not true, here one of the top Mexican experts saw it. Here is another element that I did not mention in my interviews, but I will tell you here. Whenever such a discovery is made and approved by Latin American scientists, we can even say in Spanish, there is discrimination in that we are not given the ability to be able to give an important certification. In other words, it has to come from the US, it has to come from somewhere in Europe, it has to come from other places. Here we don't have the ability to be able to investigate and to be able to give our verdicts on different issues. And it seems to me that this is not correct, Pierre. I don't know if people have noticed this, but it is true. Where are the attacks coming from? Well, most of them come from the more developed countries. They're not coming from Latin America. They're coming from Peru because of the interest there, and from the countries, again, that supposedly have made more progress in the scientific aspects.
Sí, esto te lo confirmo, Jaime. Yo vivo en Italia.
Yes, Jaime, I can confirm that. I live in Italy, and there is a bit of a snobbish attitude towards what comes from Latin America or Central America. It is always like that. Never in Italy has information from Mexico been spoken so loudly, but in an ugly form, in a violent and lying form. And that disgusted me a lot. It bothers me a lot. That's why I asked you for the interview, so that you can respond to the Italians who are listening to liars, false people, and people who don't know anything and talk nonsense. Look, a little bit about the history of the findings. Who were the discoverers of the bodies, and now what is the position of these people?
The
discoverer was only one as far as we know. It was Leandro Benedicto Rivera, who after discovering and extracting them, did not reveal the location to anyone. Presumably in 2019, he would allow a team of very few people of ours, Thierry Jamin and Joyce Mantilla, representing us, to go to the place where he supposedly discovered them. There is a reasonable doubt that it is such a place, but not the exact one, which he continues to keep secret because there are still many things there. I would like the government of Peru to approach and have some kind of agreement with this man so that we know all the information he has, because he is the most important thing. He is the one who knows the most. He is the one who talks the least and tells a lot of lies. You never know what to expect from him. You never know if he is telling you the truth, if he is deceiving you. He, in the first instance, said that the bodies had been found in burial chambers, in coffins, etc., etc. Then it would turn out, evidently, that this had not been the case, that they had been buried in Diatom caves. But from this, you can begin to imagine the low level of reliability. The first body that was analyzed was a body of a female, so to speak, who was named Josefina. When I negotiated with him to deliver the bodies to the University of Ica so that they would not be lost because he continued to retain ownership, they had to pay, and he no longer delivered Josefina. He delivered another one that is just as valuable, which was given the name Luisa from St. Louis Gonzaga. Luisa. Josefina is from one of the members of Incari. I put that name to Maria. It stands for Mario the Discoverer. And so each of these received a name. So we will see how far it will go and whether they really realize that the most important thing is to talk to the discoverer. Because there could be much more there, and much more could be discovered, and much more could come out and be recovered from Peru to be investigated.
Claro. Leslie Orteaga.
Sure. Leslie Orteaga is Peru's Minister of Culture, Jaime. He said through the media, he believes there is an international criminal complaint against you by the Ministry of Culture, and also against the people who brought the Nazca mummies out of Peru.
I will now go to Peru. There is fear that they may arrest me. I have no fear because I have done absolutely nothing and they should prove it to me. There has been no trial for which I can be arrested. There is no order from a judge. There is absolutely nothing. If regardless of that they will arrest me, then it will be news around the world. I don't think it will, because it could be turned against them especially, and I'll tell you again, because they are lying about the bodies. And let's move on to something very important. They say this is a national treasure, right? That's why they want to arrest people. However, they also say they are artifacts. So are they fakes or are they treasure? Because they can't be both. If they are artifacts, they are not a treasure. Then I would like them to really clarify what their function is. If they come to arrest me, it would mean that there is good news. It would mean that the bodies are real. If not, they couldn't do it. But I want to repeat once more, I had nothing to do with it. Let them do their own investigation. I had nothing to do with taking the bodies to Mexico. And why don't they go after those who are in Russia or Brazil or other places? Why don't they talk to Mr. Leandro Benedicto to find out where they are? And why don't they act against all those people who did that? I think that would be what should be done. It would correspond to the fact that they valued them, if they really considered that this is a treasure. But so far it has not done so. Up to this point, they keep saying they are artifacts. So they themselves are getting into a huge contradiction, dear peer.
Así es. Mira, ahora te voy a repetir.
That's right. Now I'm going to repeat some accusations that were made against you. I'm going to say the names of the people who made these accusations and what they said, so that you can respond. Raúl Trejo del Arbre, a researcher at the Institute of Social Research at the Autonomous University of Mexico, said, "What happened yesterday in the Mexican Congress was a spectacle with information that was not necessarily verifiable, in the name of a fanaticism that seeks much more media speculation and political gain, instead of explaining the phenomenon of possible life outside the universe. It's an issue that is beyond the duties of the Congress."
24 horas después.
Sí.
24 hours later, without having done any research, without having confuted the evidence that has been presented, without having confuted the experts who have spoken. So what kind of scientist are we talking about? A science geek. In other words, there is no more Holy Inquisition. Now there is Holy Science. I am a scientist, and you are not, so you must be condemned. Because I, a scientist, determine it that way, no? Right? Because I don't know how Mr. Trejo could have all the information just 24 hours after this extraordinary news was presented. From that you can see the almost visceral reactions of scientists. No, they didn't. They did not present anything. They are fanatics. Why? Why don't we think the same way? Why don't they want to accept that we are being visited? Why can't they understand how we can travel through space over these enormous distances in a short time? So everything that has been presented is false. No matter what you present, it is false.
Gabriela Frías, investigadora del programa de derechos humanos,
Gabriela Frias, Human Rights Program researcher, said that archaeologist Flavio Estrada said they are puppets made to look like cinematic extraterrestrials.
Ya expliqué. O sea,
I have already explained. What does she know about this? You don't know anything, and does Flavio Estrada know what was done? Do you know that he was asking for money? He went on a lecture tour in Peru to talk about how these bodies were assembled, and that he charged each person who attended his lectures, his presentations, $400. That he made a huge amount of money doing this, something we didn't do. And then they say, Jaime is becoming a millionaire. How? I'm not becoming a millionaire because of that. I earn my money from other ways that have nothing to do with the phenomenon. The phenomenon, as you know, has left me very little. It left me fame. It left me other things. But money? I barely survive. So they really say a lot of nonsense.
Claro. Y
Clear. Gabriela Frias says that it is important that science reaches everyone so that people don't fall into these deceptions.
Me parece que la primera parte tiene razón, que la ciencia llega a todos.
It seems to me that in the first part she's right, that science reaches everyone, and that scientists investigate. However, she is not presenting anything here. I could also say very bad things about them, and wouldn't I be right? So I think they are deficient on research. It is pure blah, blah, blah. Where is the evidence to show that these bodies are not authentic? Where are they? I have not seen them. The moment I see evidence that proves I am wrong, I will be the first to say I was wrong. I was wrong. I was wrong in good faith because I never tried to deceive. But that hasn't happened yet, Pierre. No one has presented a single piece of evidence to show that this is false. No one. Not Flavio Estrada and no one else. Not the Ministry of Culture, not any of the scientists who have spoken, no one. The experts who say no, that they have already seen the X-rays and so on, and they are false. Where is the evidence? Those who say they are artifacts, why don't they create one of these figures so we can see how easy it is? One thing is to say they are artifacts, so make one then. The university said, the National University of Mexico said it would show how these bodies were assembled. It didn't. Do you know why it didn't? Because it's almost impossible. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but to place organic eggs that are real inside the abdomen of these bodies, how do you do that? Also, in the investigations, it was found that there were eggs of less than 1 millimeter that were in the process of forming inside channels. Therefore, in order to create the eggs that exist in beings, that is, it is impossible to falsify these bodies. Stop telling lies.
It is impossible, Jaime, because the bodies are complete externally and also in the internal organs.
No, they say the head is of llamas. The head looks like a llama's head. I saw, someone showed me how it could be done, but you have to hollow it out. You have to break it. You have to carve it. They would not be natural heads, and they are also the opposite of how they should be, because at the bottom would be the front. That is, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense. These bodies have retractable necks. This was stated by Dr. Zalce Benitez. How could this be done? Like turtles. And if you see, the head is similar to turtles. They have a lot of reptilian parts, and they have bird parts. The bones are hollow like birds, and they also have septum in the middle of the lower limb bones. This has not been observed in any species on Earth. This is an important discovery that has just been made, which also shows that the bodies have nothing to do with our evolution.
Te voy a planear otra contestación, Jaime.
I'm going to propose to you another rebuttal, Jaime, Mr. Rodolfo Salas Gismondi. It's that these people have the titles, they have famous names, and they sound great. But what they really say in front of the truth sounds like a lot of nonsense. So, Rodolfo Salas Gismondi, who is a research paleontologist at the Peruvian Cayetano Heredia University, and also a research associate at the American Museum of Natural History in New York, argued that the alleged humanoid tridactyl, i.e., three-fingered mummies from Nazca, that were presented at the Mexican Congress are a farce. According to Gismondi, the hands and feet of these mummies are actually human remains whose fingers have been amputated at the edges to achieve an alien appearance, and that the three fingers on the hand are the result of the removal of phalanges and metacarpals of the thumb and little finger. According to the specialist, the feet would have suffered the mutilations in addition to cutting the skin and soft tissue behind the toes, producing a foot with extremely long toes, with no plant support and functionally useless. He said this in a September 16 interview on Panamericana Television's 2023 and 24 Hours program.
You told me he is an archaeologist? Is he an archaeologist?
Paleontologist and researcher at Peruvian Cayetano Heredia University and research associate at the American Museum of Natural History in New York.
Paleontologist. Let him make one. Let him make a body. It doesn't matter all he says. He hasn't proved anything. It's not about words here. If it's physical evidence, you have to physically prove it. He has never had these bodies in his hands, ever. He has seen shoddy pictures. He never came to see the bodies. He never went to the University of Ica. He never talked to the experts at the University of Ica. There is a team of 12 specialists there, a multidisciplinary team that is analyzing the bodies, and they will present their preliminary report in the coming weeks. And hopefully before the end of the year, they will present their final report. That's where we will see, with the people who have been investigating this, whether or not this is real evidence. Because I think that those of Mr. Gismondi are just words. If he says they can be facts, let him make one and prove to us that what he says is true. That they can be amputated and that you don't notice, that you can recreate your whole hand, like these hands and these feet, and then we will gladly pay attention to what he says. Meanwhile, it sounds more like a statement made from the gut and not with the head.
Claro. Y me parece, Jaime, que...
Of course, and it seems to me, Jaime, that there have been attempts by the Peruvian government to take the bodies away from the University of Ica.
5 times the police went there, not just the authorities. The police went to the university and tried to force their way in. And the university, heroically, did not allow them to take the bodies away. Why do you think they don't want them to be taken away? Because they are fake bodies? Why do you think they are so interested in continuing the investigation? Because it will project your university to unprecedented heights. They can get resources to continue with the research. They can really open up to the world. If scientists don't trust me because I'm a journalist, they should trust the scientists at the University of Ica. They should go there. Because I believe that this very soon will hit the front pages, and Ica scientists will open up the opportunity for any scientist or institution to collaborate with them, to continue the research. Do you think Ica scientists would do this if they were not convinced? It would also be the end of their university, as it would also be the end of my career, the end of the career of Dr. Jose Zalz, and of all of us who participated, including the politician who took us there, because that would never be forgiven. It would remain as one of the great frauds of history. So it would be absurd for me, who has more than 50 years of career, right now to bring a fake body to a place, to a world stage where everybody would ask questions and question it. What crazy person would do that? Do you think I would risk it in this way? I'm convinced that's why I did it. Because it's certain, because it's true, and because I can't be silent. Because this phenomenon really gives us an opportunity to really unite humanity. The only thing that can unite humanity is the extraterrestrial presence, nothing else. The world is more divided than ever. Wars are everywhere. Diseases, climate change, mass extinction of animal species, insects, and this phenomenon could end all that and could unite us. If you ask me why I do it, that's why I do it. Because I believe in the generations of the future and that children deserve the truth. Enough of so many lies. It is time to present the evidence. Having this evidence and access to it, I felt an obligation to do so, which was risky. I knew it was risky, but what I didn't know is that they were going to ignore all the evidence that has been presented, to present other evidence that is false. And on the basis of that, they tried to discredit the extraordinary evidence that we are showing. But I knew it's physical evidence. That's the difference. It's physical. It's not photographs. It's not video. All of that has always been discredited. They always said it can be something else. I myself presented a body 7 years ago, 8 years ago, and I could not defend it. Yes, I defended it and proved that it was another body that was being talked about. However, it was very difficult to defend it when some scientist said to me, I can't touch it. I can't read it. I can't know what its DNA is. I can't say it's true or not. We need physical evidence so we can do that. Now the physical evidence is there. Don't ignore it, investigate it.
Estoy de acuerdo, Jaime. Ahora llego a la polémica que pasó.
I agree, Jaime. Now I come to the controversy that happened with UNAM, because Corina Solinas, head of LIMA, which would be the National Laboratory of Mass Spectrometry with Accelerators of UNAM, explained that carbon-14 dating, this is a controversy that has had a lot of support in Italy, that carbon-14 dating solely is intended to determine the antiquity of the sample brought by the users, and in no case to draw conclusions about the origin of that sample. LIMA members did not conduct any sampling or come into contact with the original source of the InSight sample. Therefore, LIMA disassociates itself from any subsequent use, interpretation, or later misrepresentation that is made with the results they issue. In your opinion, Jaime, what would be the interpretation?
It has no basis whatsoever. I mean, when did I say that the university supported the results? The only thing I said, Pierre, was that the university had done the carbon-14 analysis and that the antiquity was 1,000 years. That is all I said. Review the hearing. The university was the first one that said, I dissociate myself. You dissociate from what? From what? And what are they talking about in Italy? About what? I mean, they didn't even see the hearing. I mean, I realize they haven't seen it. First they have to see it. First they have to see it. And then they will realize. I hope this week to have it at least in English so that the world will realize everything that was said and unsaid. Because there are many lies. The scientists of Italy or the communicators of Italy rely on what the university said, that it dissociates itself. And whoever associated it, who said it had participated in the investigation, the only thing I said, and I stand by it, plus it is true, is that they did the carbon-14 analysis. Period. So where do they get the rest from? It is a desire to destroy, to discredit, and they really deserve the public to realize who is lying, because I never involved the university.
You never asked the university to confirm that these are extraterrestrial bodies.
Of course I didn't. The only thing I did was bring samples. I didn't even tell them what they were about. I didn't tell them what they were, and they returned some documents that I have here where they told me the antiquity. That was it. That is as far as the involvement of the university is concerned. I never involved it. Where do they get this from? Where do they get it from?
Sure.
Hard to understand. There is no objective investigation by either the media or scientists.
Otra persona, Alejandro Frank.
One more person, Alejandro Frank, researcher at the Institute of Nuclear Sciences, said that what you did, presenting the bodies, are misdeeds.
Una más de la larga lista de fechorías.
One more in the long list of misdeeds. Let him tell me what the others are, and let him prove to me that this is a misdeed. Nobody can talk about a person in this way, Pierre. I mean, here is the violent attack, the unfounded attack. I mean, I think there is no... I am one of the journalists with the most credibility that exists in Mexico. Do you believe that I have succeeded on the basis of misdeeds? Or are you rather talking from the gut? That he has problems that I am recognized. That he has problems that the phenomenon that I have investigated is becoming real before his eyes. And now he has had here the opportunity to bring out his baser instincts because I cannot see it any other way. Of course, I do not accept any of his words because they have no foundation. I am a person of integrity, clean throughout my life. I have never had any problems with the justice system or anyone. I have never been sued. So what are they talking about? What is this gentleman talking about?
Look, Jaime, I ask you these questions because I want you to answer them. I don't want you to eat your heart out.
I know. It's okay for you to ask me and also give me a chance to vent. Because where is... Let's see. What is it? Maybe one more misdeed of Pier Giorgio Carria, of his long list? Is it this one?
Otro.
Pero ¿sabes qué?
Casi estoy terminando.
I'm almost coming to the end, Jaime.
Let's see. Now let me ask you a question here. What will happen when this is proven to be real? What will happen with everyone who is talking?
That they will have to hide.
they will have to hide, and they will have to shut up. Because now that it's being acknowledged that there are UFOs, that there are spaceships, I haven't seen anybody asking for forgiveness and saying that everything they attacked before was wrong. Nobody does that. They simply shut up and hide. They are lost there in the darkness, right? And that's going to happen even now, because this case is not dead, and it's very far from being dead. There's physical evidence that needs to be investigated.
Look,
Giulietta Fierro, science popularizer, physicist, and astronomer at UNAM, said, "People create stories like the Nazca mummies because we are enchanted by fantastic stories."
Look, one of the ones that deserve the least respect from me is this lady. She was a terrible student. She took I don't know how many years to finish her degree. And then after taking so long, she finally became an astronomer. And little by little, she made a name for herself. But she is a deeply ignorant person. Let me give you an example. I went to a debate with her, and she said that what had been found in Roswell was actually a satellite. It was a satellite in 1947, Pierre. And then, what does she have to do with a research on physical bodies? She is an astronomer. She has the same knowledge of forensic science as I do. She doesn't even have the right to speak. But she is a person who, whenever she could, always mocked, always tried to discredit our work. And now that she has been given the opportunity to speak, she does so with great pleasure.
Understood. Another expert, Jaime. Miguel Bodella Lopez, director of the anthropology laboratory at the University of Granada in Spain, said that the issue is a farce because the alleged alien mummies of Nazca have been investigated before, and allegedly they are fake.
Did he investigate them?
Clearly not.
So who investigated them, Dr. Bodella? If you are listening, please tell me who investigated them. Because the Ministry of Culture didn't, their anthropologists didn't. The only ones who investigated these bodies are us, the scientists, journalists, and people who have been close to the case, no one else. So, it was investigated is another vile lie. He did not analyze them. Let him present his own investigations or present the research of others. And if he wants to present Flavio Estrada's research, he has to realize that they are not the same bodies. So really, you know what they show? A profound ignorance on this issue. A profound ignorance of what this research has meant. They talk for the sake of talking. They talk for the sake of prominence, to always be there, to give their opinion even when nobody asks them.
Of course, the ones by Flavio Estrada were the ones about manufactured bodies, right?
That's right. And I can send you the segment where in 2017, I presented them on television. I mean, it's something I know, it's something that's there. And we said those bodies are artifacts, and they were with the others. And we investigated them because no one else did. And the only thing Flavio Estrada did was to present a body which we already knew was an artifact, and also to say that it had modern elements, because Mr. Paul Ronceros absurdly glued a foot to it because it was broken. They told him it was for television, and so he wanted it to look nice, and therefore he glued his foot. He didn't want it to look broken. It's silly, but they took full advantage of it to try to discredit a real case. But I don't think that in the end, this could be the evidence that proves that the case is not real. Period.
Quizás uno de los más importantes periódicos diarios del mundo, el New York.
Perhaps one of the world's leading newspapers, the New York Times, September 13th article reported statements by astrobiologist Antigone Segura Peralta, who questioned your claims, saying that these conclusions are simply not supported by the evidence.
Then what are they supported by? There is the body, there are the analyses, there are the X-rays, the tomographs. Is DNA not scientific? Is carbon-14 not scientific? So, what are you talking about?
Jaime, the article is from the 13th, from the day after. She came to all the evidence in 24 hours? Impossible.
Surely, she didn't even see the hearing.
Also, the New York Times reported in the same article that another analysis done in 2021 determined that the head, we've already talked about this, that the head of one of the specimens was the skull of a deteriorated llama. Well, what about the whole body?
Lama's
bone is much thicker than these bodies. These bodies have very thin bones. So obviously no real investigation has been done. They are eager to try to discredit a real phenomenon. The New York Times has been characterized always by being against this phenomenon. The only thing it has done, which has favored investigation, is the article of December 16, 2017, where it talked about the secret investigation that the Pentagon was conducting on the phenomenon, nothing more. The rest you are saying also has no basis.
Yes, you're talking about the one directed by Luis Elizondo, right?
Correct?
Esta es una contestación, Jaime, quizás un poco estúpida.
This is a criticism, Jaime, maybe a little bit silly. However, I am telling you this because if they say these bodies are alien, how is it possible that on other planets living organisms are carbon-based like Earth? And also that the amount of carbon-14 in their atmosphere would not necessarily be the same as on Earth, which would prove that the beings of Nazca are not extraterrestrial.
And how do they know that?
They are the extraterrestrials.
Well, do they have any examples? Do they have anything to compare? Do they have another body somewhere else? So how do they know there's no carbon? How do they know that? The basis of life of everything is amino acids: hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and carbon. So how can there not be carbon if there is carbon in so many parts? Right now, the asteroid Bennu is being studied. In the samples that OSIRIS-REx just brought in, to determine if it has the same basis of life that there is here on Earth or other places, even on an asteroid. Because if it's discovered that way, then it will prove that all the precursors of life came from space and would be the same in any case. And remember, I'm not an expert. I mean, they should be ashamed of themselves, Pierre.
Vamos a las conclusiones.
Let's go to the conclusion, Jaime. You've already talked about this, but had you predicted that there would be such a violent reaction to showing these bodies?
No tan violenta, no.
No, that violent, no. Because they did it without relying on any evidence. And that's very difficult to predict, isn't it? I mean, they ignore everything that is presented to rely solely on what they believe. In other words, the words go away, the facts remain. Where are the facts? Where is the manufactured body? Where is an alien body to which you can compare this to say that it is not the same? Where is a DNA test that proves it is not? Where are the X-rays, the fluoroscopies? Thermo, how do you call it? All the elements that have been used, where are they? To prove us wrong? No one has presented them. All they have said are just words. Words and more words. There is no fact to prove that this case is false. And the only one available is Flavio Estrada's analysis of a wrong body.
Look, maybe at the political level, nobody expected such a violent reaction. How was the reaction after this whole situation? And how did Congressman Luna react as well?
In Mexico, I have the general approval of the public. In Mexico, everybody believes that what I presented is real. There is nothing here that they are saying in other places. And I'm telling you again, the more supposedly developed the countries are, the more attacks have come from there to what we have presented. Because they can't believe that in a country like Mexico, a discovery of this level is being made, and that the Mexican scientists who have been involved support it. They cannot tolerate that.
Of course. And it seems, Jaime, that NASA has also taken an interest in these bodies.
Yes, it has taken an interest. It hasn't spoken against it. Neither has Neil from Grace Tyson, who said, it's good that this has been brought to light. It needs to be investigated. NASA also said, It needs to be investigated. That's what needs to be done. I'm waiting to be able to talk to them, and when I talk to them, I'll talk to NASA. I can tell that sooner or later we will have a communication. And well, if they get interested, we will open all the doors as we open them to any Italian scientist who wants to come here and investigate. Gladly, with pleasure, we do that.
Does that mean, Jaime, that the doors are open to any specialized scientist who wants to see the bodies?
Any university, to any institution, to anybody. So if this were false, I would not make this kind of offer. If this was false, I wouldn't risk it at this level.
¿Qué piensas de hacer, Jaime?
What are you going to do, Jaime, with all the people and institutions, though, that have offended and slandered you?
Bueno, primero demostrar que el caso es real.
Well, first of all, prove that the case is real, and then I will see what measures I will take in Mexico. For now, I have already informed that because of the false information that the government is giving, or rather the Ministry of Culture of Peru, I am going to start a legal process. I already have lawyers in Peru, and I will do it, and I will win, because they never investigated the bodies. And then what is everybody in the world going to do when they hear that I won a lawsuit against the Ministry of Culture of Peru for telling lies? What are they going to say then? This is very far from over. A new hearing is coming where I will present new surprises so that those who are against me can give themselves all the pleasure of continuing to attack, because I will continue to present the truth, and this will remain in history. This will not end here, nor will it end with the end of my life. It will end when the investigation ends.
You mean there will be another hearing in the House of Representatives?
I will discuss it in the next few hours between today and tomorrow with the deputies. And if they agree, it seems that they have stated that there will be a second hearing, also to make public the amendments to the law on airspace protection. And I will take the opportunity to bring more scientists who have investigated this, more evidence that will show that the bodies are real, and we will also show that the Institute of the Ministry of Culture of Peru lied.
Ryan Graves publicó una nota en X.
Ryan Graves posted a note on X or Twitter saying that the presentation of the bodies covered the most important part, which was the first part, the part about the aerial phenomenon.
Look, he left very happy with the hearing. I talked to him on the way out, and he was very happy. I was going to offer him a lunch, a recognition, where he was going to meet with all the pilots. He was really very excited about all this, and the next morning he left. He said he had had a problem at home, and I had to pay him a new ticket, and I even got him first class, so that he would be back at 1 p.m. the next day. Everything suggests to me that he got a call from somebody. Remember, he's still on salary from the Pentagon. It's very easy to think that there he got an order telling him, get out of there immediately, take the first plane and come back here. That's what he did. And he lied when he said he had an emergency at home, and then to get there and write that tweet, which I don't think is correct because the investigation was not backward. Is it backward? In the United States, there is continued talk about the phenomenon. What has been talked about to provide the amendments has become real. In what way has he been harmed? What he was damaged in was his level of prominence. That irked him because you know what I realized? That he was super protagonist. I mean, he was walking alone in front of the cameras like that. And suddenly he realized that he wasn't going to be the center of attention. And I think he didn't like that at all. And that was another thing he didn't like and nothing else, because he has nothing more to say. He's not an expert on anything.
Al final, Jaime, un análisis y un comentario tuo.
To finish up, Jaime, your analysis and commentary on everything that has happened to date with this issue of the bodies, maybe some information that you want to add that we haven't talked about.
Es muy simple, Pierre, que yo espero que se realice.
It's very simple, Pierre. I hope that an investigation will be conducted by high-level institutions and that they will come to their own conclusions based on the facts, that they will present it, that it can be analyzed by other experts, that they will agree with what those institutions say, and then we will all be happy. If they are false, they are false. If they are real, they are real. And if they are real, you have to change history. You have to rewrite it. Because it's not just that extraterrestrial bodies have been found. extraterrestrial bodies have been found that were buried by a pre-Columbian, pre-Hispanic culture 1,000 years ago, that they were there, that they lived here, that they were respected, that they were buried, and offerings were placed next to their bodies, showing that it was something important to the people of Earth at that time. And that's why history needs to be rewritten. And then we should reconsider the pyramids, the role of the pyramids, what happened in Egypt and so many other places. I think that is the most important thing, which changes history and gives us the opportunity to unite as a species, the human species on planet Earth, and that we could begin a peaceful communication with other intelligences. I think this could be the beginning of the way out of the terrible problems we are facing. In other words, huge crises that will arise if we do nothing.
Yes, son, it seems to me, Jaime, that three-fingered beings are reported in many cultures, in archaeological finds, textiles, vases, etc. So a possibly massive presence worldwide.
Así es. O sea, y también la cultura dogu.
Yes, it is. And even the Dogu culture has figurines very similar to these bodies. And I think this could also show that they were not only in Peru, but also in Japan and other places. I think this is very important, and we have to start investigating this possibility, and then open this up to everybody, and not let scientists take positions that are opposite to what a scientist is. A scientist is curious and investigative, not repeating what others say or making up stories with the sole purpose of destroying the truth. I have never seen anything like that, but evidently scientists have really lost objectivity in this investigation.
Thank you very much, Jaime, for this very interesting and very important interview.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.